Hello, friends. Happy Thanksgiving. Oh my goodness. Happy St. Patrick's Day. It's been a long, rough day. Hey, I'm Terry, your District 8 Director. I want to welcome our friends from across the District 8, the entire ARBA, and wherever else y'all may be. This evening, we're joined by Judge Jeff Hardin out of North Carolina, and Jeff is going to be speaking on Belgian hares. Throughout the presentation, please chime in your locations. You know, we always love to see where our viewers are from. And of course, join in with any questions, type those in. And once Jeff's finished, Amanda back at our control center will be reading those off to Jeff. So with that, Jeff, my friend, it's all yours.
Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to speak on Belgian hares. For the District 8 Youth Workshop. I began raising rabbits in 1969, and Belgian hares were always a breed that I admired, I enjoyed seeing, and in 1982, I first began breeding Belgian hares. In fact, I think if we look at those individuals who are actively breeding and showing Belgian hares today, we don't have anyone left now that was back there in the early 1980s that is still actively breeding or showing the animals or actively involved in the Belgian hares other than myself. But it's a great breed and it's an honor to be able to speak about them tonight. If you've looked at the history of the Belgian hare, you know that it has a very long history going back to the 1800s. It's the breed who actually started a lot of fanfare and England at that time period. They were sold for extremely large sums of money, $500, $600, $700 at that time. And if you think about the value of what that would be now, it's quite an astronomical amount. Unfortunately, the heyday didn't last forever, and we saw a decline in the breed. And in fact, for a number of years, we saw the Belgian hares actually drop in number. You can go back and look at some of the reports in terms of the number of Belgian hares that were shown at various shows along the time period. So it is a pleasure for me to speak on them tonight. If you're going to be actively involved in Belgian hares, I suggest you become quite familiar with the parts of the American Rabbit Breeders Association standard. If you're here in the United States or Canada or somewhere that uses the ARBA standard for its evaluation system, there's a couple sections in here that I would just bring your attention to that applicably apply to the Belgian hare. The first section, of course, is the rabbit glossary in the front. And the term arch. It's extremely important to look at how the term arch is defined, because the Belgian hare falls into the full arch profile breed. And of course, that takes us to, when we look at the different profile types for the rabbits, we have the full arch breed. We have a number of checkered giants, Britannia petites, Rhinelanders, and so forth that also fall into that full arch breed. So it's important, I would say, to read what it says about the full arch breed and have an understanding of what's called for in a full arched animal. And then, of course, we've got a color picture here of the Belgian hare in the front. And then the most important piece is indeed the breed standard for the Belgian hares. If you look at it, and you know, this is the main thing that a judge should be judging by. It's the thing that the breeders should be breeding by. General type, 50 points. So you say, okay, it's a 50-50 rabbit with the other 50 points spread amongst other things. But I would bring you attention to a couple things that tie into that general type, one of which is condition. Belgian hares put 10 points on condition per ARBA standard. ARBA standard for condition talks about the firmness of the flesh, the overall general health of the animal, as well as the condition of the fur, etc. So you take some of that 10 points, then it's transferred up here in what becomes general type. Because if you've got a nice firm animal, that shows in the type of that animal. Then, of course, the fur is only 10 points. So ideally, the fur is 10 points, same as the condition. But again, when we talk about the condition, it mentions the quality of the fur in terms of overall condition. So a few of those condition points are also going into your fur quality. Then you have color, 20 points. You have ticking and markings, 10 points. And of course, you have 100 points for your total. Belgian Hares is a 4-class breed. Even though when you look at the weights, we have senior bucks and does that have a very wide weight range. They can be as small as 6 pounds or as heavy as 9.5 pounds. And then, of course, our juniors are simply 3 pounds and above. And of course, we can show up as well. When we look at the animals, and I'm going to get an animal out. And the first thing we talk about in the standard, of course, is general type in the body. And it's 25 points. If you're going to assess the body type on any animal, the animal needs to be in a proper posed position. If you've been to very many ARBA judges and registrars conference, you know that one of the requirements is posing and handling. And they put posing and handling in that requirement because of the overall importance of being able to pose an animal and to handle the animal that goes in or translates into the overall assessment of the animal. If an animal's not properly posed, if an animal's not properly handled, you can't have a proper assessment of it. Belgian Hare is not an easy breed for some people to handle. There's been a lot of theories put out there in terms of how you handle them, how you don't handle them, that sort of thing. My philosophy with Belgian Hares is Belgian Hares are hands-free. They should pose on their own, and they should pose easily. And it shouldn't be a big fight to get them to pose. A couple things I will tell you in terms of overall handling mistakes, and you can tell whether a person understands this breed or not, is how they handle them. If you see people who put their hands here under this neck, notice what she immediately starts doing. No one wants to have a hand under the throat. It's like being choked. The same way with the Belgian Hares. So if you see people doing this sort of a handling method, they don't understand the breed. The rabbit's going to resist, and you're not going to get what you should be getting out of this animal. The other issue with handling them, these ears up here have the ability to be damaged, especially if they have one of these death grips on them, like so. If you put this death grip on here to hold them up, first of all, you see she's tensed up as soon as you do it, and you can form a hematoma. So never handle them like this. The other issue that you see with handling Belgian Hares is a lot of judges want to face the rabbit this way and judge it. And what that rabbit then does is wants to jump over the shoulder, jump off the table, that sort of thing. So I'll tell you, you can do the handling left or right, but you'll get more out of the rabbit, and the rabbit's protected if you line the rabbit up so that you use the length of the table. The animal then decides to leap, it's going to leap on the table. It decides to leap this way. If you're left-handed, then it's going to leap on the table. You don't want the animal leaping over your shoulder, getting hurt down to the floor or whatever. So use the table to your advantage when you're posing the Belgian Hare. I had a conversation with a colleague, Alan Norman, one time about posing and evaluating and judging hares. And one of the things we still talk about is the fact that a term with them is less is more. Less is more. The less you handle them, the more you're going to get out of them. Of course, we want these animals, when we look at the body type, we want a nice, elegant, graceful animal. So for me, if the animal doesn't readily pose up, I simply take this hand here. It can be left or right hand. I lift it up. I get it up on its toes. I can use this hand to move the feet back, position them as I need to, if I need to do anything, yeah, she's already tired. It's to simply easily stroke the ears, caress the ears. And a lot of these animals refer or respond to a sound like you can get their attention and they do more. But you want the animal to be able to be up and show you what it's got. A lot of people you'll see also trying to judge them, hold them up like this. Well, you're holding them up like this, you can evaluate the length of their leg and you can evaluate the strength of their leg, but you never are able to see the strength of their ankles. These animals should have short toes. They should be able to stand up on their toe, and they should do that on their own. You want an elegant rabbit. This is an elegant breed of rabbit. When you look at faults in the body, notice that broad hips, short body, dewlaps are fault. So we have no dewlap there. We don't have a short body. We have actually a nice, elegantly long body. We have a full arch. And again, if you read in the glossary that talks about an arch, we know that the arch starts here at the back of the neck. Our standard talks about at the shoulder. Shoulders have two places, the front and the back. Personally, I think if the arch starts properly, it's going to start at the front of that shoulder. The front of the shoulder is actually the nape of the neck. It's a synonymous location. Whether you use the word starting at the nape or starting at the front of the shoulder, it's irrelevant. It's the same thing. And it's a continuous curve. Condition, again, is per ARBA standard. So we need to understand that this animal should be firm in flesh and smooth, just like you were judging any other type of animal. Faults then, notice there's a very small number of faults. Short body, broad hips, dewlaps. That's it for body. Then we go to the head. There's 5 points on the head, rather long, narrow, head set relatively on a slender neck. She, again, this doe, it's a nice little doe, has a good example of that. Faults, a blocky bulldog type head. Back in the 60s, when I first got into rabbits, you would see some New Zealand's that had really big bulldog heads. What you will find in this breed, though, is there's a difference in masculinity between the male and the female. Some of the European standards actually recognize this and will put pictures in their standards that represent the male head and the female head, because we know through genetics that the male head can be a bolder, slightly bolder head than a female head. And we'll see this in the Belgian hares also. So when you talk about this, you're talking about the difference between a masculine and a feminine head. And then, of course, we go to the ears. 5 points on the ears: thin, fine, carried erect, in proportion to the size of the head and body. So we want the ears to correspond and match. You don't want a real short ear on a long rabbit. You don't want a real long ear on a short rabbit. Everything is harmonious with the breed. And then, of course, eyes. Only 3 points on eyes, but we want a large, bold eye with a wild expression. And when you see these eyes, you can see the hare's eyes. They are bold, they're alert, they're expressive. It's a very different look than many other breeds. Feet and legs, 10 points. Forelegs are to be long, slender, straight. Hind legs are to be long, fine, carry the body well off the ground. Faults, heavy, short, bone legs. That's the only fault for the legs. Heavy, short. So when you look at the front legs, this doe has a very nice leg. And again, we like to see them up on their toes. A big thing, and I'll show you in a moment, is when you look at these animals properly posed up, they have short toes. In Europe, a lot of the standards actually refer to this as cat paws, because you know the toes on a cat are extremely short and they're standing up on those toes. And then, of course, the tail, we actually have 2 points on the tail, long, straight, and carried in line with the body. Fur, 10 points. It's a flyback coat. You want it held close to the body. You want some brilliance. You can see that. It's not a dull coat. And it's to have a stiff texture. And you can feel it. It gives some resistance when you stroke it. It's not a soft, cottony type fur. And you'll also notice that in our standard, there are no faults. Even though it defines what it wants, there are no faults for fur. So the fur may not match the standard, but it doesn't list any faults for the fur. Then we have color. We have two varieties in the Belgian hare. We have the rufous and we have the tan. This is, of course, the rufous color. The tan variety is recognized in 4 separate colors. So you have black tans, blue tans, chocolate tans, and lilac tans. It's our newest variety, only been in the standard a couple of years. The other thing about this, when you look at the Belgian hare standard, it talks about the rufous color, R-U-F-U-S. And this is just a pet peeve of mine. But if you look up the word R-U-F-U-S, as opposed to the word R-U-F-O-U-S, you'll see there's distinctly different meanings of those two words. Unfortunately, this is not the word that we always used in our standard, R-U-F-U-S. R-U-F-U-S actually refers to the surname of a male, meaning redheaded. At one point in our standard, we actually use the word R-U-F-O-U-S, which actually means a color, reddish brown. And I really think at some point when spell check came along, spell check thought that the word that was wanted in this particular place was the male surname. It got switched and it's never been changed. So that's just a little educational tidbit. As an educator for 35 years, I think it's important that we look at words and the meaning of words. I was very fortunate to grow up knowing Robert Byrne. We call him Bobby Byrne, one of the judges from the Midwest, sort of Midwest, Kentucky. Bobby was an excellent judge. He was a brilliant person when it comes to the standard. Bobby read his standard every night. And one of the things he always told judges, and he told especially young judges, is words have meanings. And when you use a word, you need to understand that that word has a meaning and use it properly. So things like that, I always think of Bobby. But so when we look at the color for rufous, the first thing it talks about is a brilliant, rich, deep red of a tan or chestnut shade. The intermediate band is to be a rich rufous red, clearly defined over a band of slate, so you have a blue undercolor. And then it talks about it's to carry down the sides. You talk about the ears laced in black. It talks about the fact that you want the tail, underside white, light eye circles, etc. Then when you look at faults, it talks about mahogany color. It talks about grayness or white hairs in any section. It talks about ticking, light bars, blotches on the feet, legs, or eye circles too large. Now the rufous color, the meaning of rufous color has been a contention for probably as long as it's been used in the Belgian hare standard. If you look up the meaning of the rufous color, it tells you a reddish brown. That's the definition of rufous. And so if we go and look at our faults, it says mahogany color. Well, a lot of folks don't understand what mahogany color is. And if you look up mahogany color, it tells you mahogany color is also a brownish red. So we have some conflicting information and understanding between what we have. The main thing I will say for color is we don't want yellow looking rabbits. We don't want rabbits with gray on the hips. We don't want rabbits with big shadow bars on their feet. We want rich color. And of course, when you blow into it, we want undercolor that is deep red. We want to be able to see the ticking over the top. And you'll notice that other than the fact that we talk about mahogany color, there's not a lot there besides the the white hairs, the eye circles, or the yellowing. You'll often hear in the assessment of the Belgian hare terms like it's too dark in color. But if you look at the book, notice there's nothing that talks about a fault that says too dark in color. There's not a disqualification for that. The only disqualification under color is any other color eye. And of course, in the Rufus, they're having a brown eye. So one of the things we often hear, and there's a couple of judges that have talked about this, that the comments given for a breed should be relative. And by relative, that means that they should actually come from something within the standard. I heard a judge one time talk about the high point of the hip on the Belgian hare. And of course, I asked, where was that in the standard? And of course, we don't reference anything about high points and hips in the Belgian hare standard. So again, if we're doing fair assessments of these animals, we need to make sure that we reference the book, we know the standard, and we give proper comments when we evaluate them. The next section is ticking. There's 10 points on the ticking. And what it simply says is the ticking is to be brilliant black, not gray, but brilliant black. With a wavy appearance, ticking is to be plentiful but balanced to set off body color without obscuring it. Ticking is evenly distributed on the back and hips. And then our faults are ticking on the chest, ticking on the feet or legs, and heavy ticking on the cheek. Okay, those are our faults with ticking. So again, not to obscure. So if you can see Rufus color coming through, that's what we want. And of course, there's degrees of ticking. But again, the only issue with having heavy ticking, as far as a fault, as far as the standard is concerned, is heavy ticking on the cheeks, ticking on chest and legs. So again, when we're talking about the ticking being too heavy, we need to talk about too heavy where. We just need to be able to see the color coming through that ticking. So we don't want a solid coated animal, but we want to be able to see a mingling of black color and red color on the surface. Disqualification, of course, is complete lack of ticking. That piece is what we have in terms of the color of the Rufus. I'll talk about the tan in a moment. And then, of course, we go to the condition, which is 10 points. So this is a young senior doe. She's a good example of what we want in a Belgian hare. She's in proportion. She sits up nicely. She poses nicely. She's got a good top line. She's firm in her flesh. She's slick in her coat. She is finishing, though, in her color around her sides. We'll look at the other variety. The second variety that's recognized is the tan variety. And again, as I said, 4 colors: black, blue, chocolate, and lilac. And again, these animals should look in all ways like a normal Belgian hare. They should perform the same as a Rufus hare. You should have the same type of body, a nice curvature, a nice top line, long straight legs, up on their toes, feminine head on this doe. It is a doe. The only difference is the color. A lot of folks get real concerned when they hear tan hare, and they immediately want to make comparisons to the tan breed. Yes, the markings are somewhat similar. They're in the same similar places. But in terms of the importance of the tan markings, you need to look at the standard. So when we go to the tan standard and we look at the color, each one of the colors is broken down and it's defined on its own. Of course, we know that the basic markings of a tan, we have the collar, we have the nostrils, we have the eye circles, we have the triangle, we have the chest, we have ticking on the sides, we have belly and tail color, demarcation lines on our hind feet, and we have tanning on our toes. But when we start looking at point values, you'll notice that the point values are distinctly different in terms of how heavy they weigh on a tan hare. For example, we'll look at the markings. So the first 2 points is on the head. That's the nostrils, the eye circles, and the ear lacing. All of those 3 markings together is worth a total of 2 points. That's it. 2 points. 3 markings, total of 2 points. Then we go to the next one. Again, 2 more points. Those 2 points go on the triangle here. So you look at the shape, the intensity. It's worth 2 points total. The next marking, of course, is 4 points on the chest and collar. So you have the collar that goes here, the chest that goes here. You want a chest as high as possible. Yes, she could have a little more extension of color up her chest for ideal. But again, between the collar and the chest, a total of 4 points come all together. And then our last 2 points is on demarcation lines. And we have demarcation lines throughout the feet, the sides, etc. So those are the small numbers, distinctly different from the tan breed. And then color points in the Rufus, we put color points on the Rufus color and the ticking. For the tan, we separate these points. We put 13 points on the belly, 7 points on the top color. So the black color is worth 7 points. And then when we look at the belly color, which is here, we have a total then of 13 points. So again, it is a tan marked animal, but in terms of the importance based on point value, it's very different from the tan breed. And again, you want rabbits that sit up, pose naturally, and you can assess them. If you can't pose them, you can't set them properly, you can't evaluate them. And again, if you start doing this business here, then you're going to get that business there where they don't want to behave, and that's not good. So handling them underneath, you do have to use some grip underneath. You want them to know that they're comfortable and they're supported, and then let them sit. We'll look at a couple more animals. This guy is one of my older bucks. I'm still have here, still using the breed with. This buck is actually a buck that won Best Opposite Sex of Breed at the ARBA convention in 2017 in Indianapolis, Indiana. In January 2018, then he went over to the UK and won first place adult senior buck over there. So he's traveled a bit around the world. He's been successful. And again, you set him up. You want them up on their tiptoes. You can notice that his head is slightly different than those other 2 animals. It's a buck. So you have a masculine looking head on him, not as thin a head as on those does. So he does have the fact that he shows that he is a buck and it's a masculine type buck. He's molting. And again, in the Rufus color, we said from this to this. So we have a variation. So he is of a different persuasion of color. So he's on one end of the spectrum. The others are somewhat in the middle. And of course, you can see when the Belgian hare starts to molt, it's easy to see. They get patches on their side. They get patches on their back. And then, of course, it gradually comes down the side with all the new fur. But again, you want them up, set them up, and on tiptoes. Now we talk about, and you've seen 3 nice animals. I have an animal I want to show you. Which is a different beast. So this doe, we take her out, and we do basically the same thing with her as we would do with any other animal. You can see she's a nice long doe. She's totally different than the other. First of all, she's not going to get up very high. Even though you hold her up, and you try to coax her up, She's going to get up only so high. The other thing it's very important for you to look at here, this doe, even if she wanted to, she can't stand. Those other rabbits, get them out and you look at them. Where I'm going to try to do two at one time and we'll see if this works. You can see she gets up on her tiptoes. This girl here, when you look at her, she's weak in the ankle. She can't get up on her tiptoes. And if you look at this part right here, these toes are significantly longer, which causes more problem in terms of structure. Right here is her ankle. So you've got a very long, from the ankle to the tip of the toe, a very long distance, and she can't support it. It's a structural defect. And there's a lot of hares out there that cannot pose on their toes because they are weak in their ankles. When you look at her in terms of her overall profile, we try to help her get lifted up somewhat. You'll see she doesn't have the nice curvature. She also doesn't have the nice fullness and roundness in the hindquarter. She slopes, undercut severely here. And in fact, if you look at her feet here, they're carried at a V. She also, in terms of her full arch, she starts way toward the back of the shoulders as opposed to at the front of the shoulder or the nape of the neck. So, and when we talked about type, we said that one of the biggest things was broad hips. And if we look at her this way, and we were to run our hand here, her hips are broad, and you catch them just like you would a slingshot. So she's an ideal example of what you don't want in a Belgian hare in terms of overall all faults. She's undercut. She tends to chop off here. She tends to flatten here. She has extremely weak ankles. She's got long toes, and she definitely does not stand up and pose on her own. So we've seen some of the good animals and the bad animals. People talk about training. And of course, yes, you can train some animals to sit. The main thing you can do with Belgian hares is simply to train them to be on a table, to be in the presence. Some will and some won't. Those that are a bit feisty, this doe here, she's been shown, I think, once in her life. So she doesn't have a whole lot of table presence. But again, you take her out, she knows that she's supposed to get up and she can stand up on her toes. But again, wanted to show her for an example of seeing what happens in terms of her color. When her color starts to change, you have two different colors of rufous coming in, and it'll be that way until she gets her total coat. So Terry, I think that gives a big overall broad view of what Belgian hares are, what the individuals should be looking for in terms of a quality hare, how to properly evaluate a hare, handle a hare, pose a hare. And at this point, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All righty, Jeff. Hey, thank you for your time here, and we'll get to questions in just a second. I want to remind everybody, if you haven't typed in your questions yet, please do so. Chime in where you're located at. And for those just who may not have seen the whole event, besides being still here on District 8 Facebook, this event is being recorded for our YouTube channel, and that is called ARBA D8 website. And give Amanda at the Control Center a few days, and it'll be up there. So now, shooting over to Amanda, what all do we have?
We have some chime-ins.
Okay.
Give me 1 second here. Hold on a second. We have some chime-ins here. We've got some people that are watching in from, they're saying that they're from Brazil, Mexico, Indiana, New Jersey. I think the one is from Missouri at this point. There's some Ohio's, Pennsylvania, that has chimed in and say that they are watching. There are some young ladies watching in from Indiana right now. As far as that goes, those are the only questions that I have at this point, or not, there's questions, but those are the only chime-ins that I have at this point.
Okay. Okay, did you say you did have some questions or you don't? I didn't hear that right.
I think I have questions. You gotta give me a minute.
Okay.
Thank
Okay, I'll just
you.
take while Amanda's getting that ready, just a couple other things here. Future workshops. I don't have any more to announce tonight, but we're working on a few, and I hope everybody be really, really pleased with those. I know I'm pretty excited about them. Also, y'all probably do have your resolutions out to be voted on, and please, if you haven't returned those ballots yet, please do so. Read the resolutions, reread them. And, the ARB board unanimously endorsed them. So, we really encourage a yes vote. But hey, if you want to vote no, that's everyone's choice. Just please take part in the voting there. Okay, did I buy you some time, Amanda?
Yeah, I think so. There was a comment, I guess there was at one point mentioned about the list of breeds that are in the front of the standard. And the list of the breeds in front of the standard, they were listed in the old one, but they are no longer listed in the new one. So I'm going to answer that question on behalf. With such a broad weight range, is there an ideal weight range?
So the standard, if you go back to the standard and refer to it, it says an ideal weight of 8 pounds for what that's worth. We don't assign points to weight, but we do give that ideal weight of 8 pounds.
Let me see here. So there's a question. Some states there's no ideal, there's no standard except for ARBO with your showmanship presentations. This one is asking for showmanship, for youth showmanship. Are you to pose the rabbit, you're supposed to pose the rabbit in all 4 directions? Do you do this for a hare as well? I'm not sure.
So, I guess if you're required to pose a rabbit in all 4 directions, then you're required to pose it in all 4 directions. But that would be a rule based on that particular showmanship competition.
Give me a second here again. Says here, so would you fault a hare with a rollback coat?
So if you have a fur that's not called for in the standard, then it's got it has to have a flyback coat. It can't have a rollback coat and meet the Belgian hare standard.
Okay. Let me see here what I've got going on. I'm sorry, I'm having some disrespectful messages that are coming as well while I'm doing this. So I'm trying to do an admin position and asking the questions.
Yeah, if there's anything disrespectful, totally disregard those, please.
I'm trying to delete them as they happen,
Okay.
but I'm trying
That's
to do
a
that.
lack of intelligence and lack of manners. Thank you.
Let me see here. So if there is, I believe, hold on a second, guys. So there is the rabbit that you, I guess you're dating a rabbit that had bad examples. What are the qualities that you're keeping her for?
For things like this, basically, when you try to educate folks, it's very difficult to try and show what is wrong if you don't have a bad example. So when I found a rabbit that could have as many of the bad things as possible that make it really easy to use for demonstrations, that's why I have her. Otherwise, it's hard to show someone weak ankles when you've got all your rabbits with nice strong ankles, or show them that they've got slingshot hips when your animals have nice alignment with good body type. So I keep her, and she's been around a long time, and I've used her for a number of presentations. She hasn't got any worse, and she hasn't got any better.
See here. Thank you, thank you so much. Someone was thanking you so much for your time and your sharing your beautiful animals. Let's see here. Someone recently acquired some hares. Let me see here. We recently acquired some sports for hopping. Do hares take longer to mature because we feel they are kind of small?
So it's difficult to say. Every genetic bloodline of every breed matures differently. So I don't think you can make a generic comment about yes or no. But what you will find is that once you begin breeding a particular line of rabbits, then and you learn quickly as to how long it takes specific things within that line to actually develop. Some things may develop quickly, some may develop slowly. You have certain lines of hares that may take, 8-9 months before they're truly looking like the animal that they're going to mature out to be. So the main thing is when you get young animals like that is you watch them grow, you note how they grow. Then when you start breeding them, you do the same thing. And eventually you learn how that particular line of animals develops and matures. So every line can be very different. So it's a learning curve at the beginning until you figure out exactly how your particular line does mature.
Okay, and what are the most common faults you see in your breed right now?
So some of the most common ones are front legs that are far too short, too thick, lots of animals with long toes and weak ankles, animals that are very bony over their hindquarters. You feel the pin bones. The color, of course, you still see animals that fade to a light color on the side and have gray on the haunches. Fur on some animals is still extremely, extremely thin. When you look at it, you can see immediately down to the skin. They have no density to the coat at all. And then, of course, all those things depends on being able to properly pose them and evaluate them. And if you can't do that part, then you never are able to assess the quality of the rabbits.
Jeff, with the otters being the newest variety, have you found, has the fur the same type of fur? Do they carry the same type of fur that the Rufus does yet? Or is that still a work in progress?
So it varies, Terry, on the tans. You will see tan hares that have as good a quality as the Rufus, but you'll also see some tan hares that have a much longer coat, some that have a finer coat. So they're not as uniform in coat, I would say, as a lot of the Rufus, but you are beginning to see some animals that do have exemplary coats. The tan hair doe I had out showing her a moment ago, she's a very good animal. She's got 2 or 3 overall best in shows on her. So she's been able to not only take her own variety, but she's been able to beat Rufus and then be able to actually compete on the best in show table to win best in show. So we're seeing the tan hares slowly progress in some areas. In some areas, we see them and they're very similar to what was presented, you know, at the very beginning. They've not made a lot of progress, but there are some out there that are making significant progress.
Amanda, do we have anything else?
Oh, I'm over here talking to myself. What are some things you look for as they develop as far as culling goes?
So one of the things I look for immediately is I get the young ones out and I put them on the table, and I want to see the animals to sit up and pose naturally. That's one of the first things I look for in my animals. I want them to have a presence on the table. I want to be able to put them out on the table and them to know by instinct, by genetics, by bloodline that I'm on a table and I need to be sitting there posing. This girl here, she's actually going on 5 years. She's the hare that I actually named Model Maker. She's got 52 open best in shows and probably another 15 or 20 specialty type best in shows on her. She's probably got more table awareness than a lot of rabbits have. But she from the very beginning out on the table, she knew that she was a rabbit that was out here to be shown. And the other thing I look for is structure. If the animal doesn't have proper structure, it's probably not going to get that structure later in life. So if you've got a improper top line, or you've got long toes, weak ankles, that sort of thing, then those rabbits don't have a place in the show herd or the breeding herd, and I tend to move them on out. So you know, I want rabbits that can get out without having to be manhandled, manipulated, to show a presence on the table. I want them to have a proper top line and structure. I want them to have proper toes, short toes, stand on their toes. I also want them to have a nice, firm, smooth condition. You know, it talks about an ARBA standard per ARBA definition, which is the same language that's often used in many of our commercial breeds. So these animals too, when you feel them, they should be full down here at the hip, and they should have nice, firm loins on them, etc.
Okay, anything else, Amanda?
There was just a comment that she's a beautiful animal, and did she stand out in her litter?
So she was one of 2 does in the litter that rose to the front really quick. In fact, I showed her and her sister at the 2017 ARBA convention in Indiana, and she was the first place senior doe there. Her sister was the second place senior doe. The following litter, a little doe from that litter, was actually the first place junior doe, which went on to win best of breed there at the convention, and went on to win the group 4. So the family's genetics are pretty sound. And the buck I had out earlier showing that actually won best opposite sex there at the same convention, and then won first senior buck or first adult buck at the UK's Bradford show, is a half sibling. They have the same father.
Okay, at this time, those are all the questions that I have.
Okay. You know, Jeff, I was sitting here thinking, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago at the Ohio Mini Convention. I was lucky and got to judge the Belgian Hares. It was almost like a mini national. They had a bunch of them. And I remember when I got done, I had this beautiful senior doe that I made best of breed. I got done and I went in the office and sat down and was eating and talking with some of the show committee. And I said, I just judged the best Belgian hare I've ever touched in my life. And remember, it went on to win Best in Show. And then as we found out later, it was, I think, maybe that one that you had out there a moment ago, if I recall. And that was just tremendous, tremendous animal. I couldn't believe it.
Yes, I was lucky there, Terry, 2 years in a row to actually, with a Belgian hare, to win the Ohio Mini Convention. So it's nice when you can take a rare breed like a Belgian hare that was not seeing success for a number of years. And now a lot of individuals are interested in Belgian hares. They're becoming much more popular again. I think I counted up the other day in the last, well, since I guess February 2016, just my Belgian hares alone, over 120 best in shows. So I think great for a rare breed to be able to go out there and compete, you know, against the other rabbits that have been strong for a number of years. That's for a number of years, and now a lot of individuals.
Oh, can you tell me, for Belgian hares, do they have any special nutritional requirements, let's say, as opposed to, like you might say, the traditional commercial or compact breed?
Not per se, Terry. They're pretty much like feeding other animals. I don't necessarily feed my animals the way a lot of people. I believe in feeding a lot of hay, a lot of fresh vegetables to the hares. The main difference between the hares and some of your other animals is the way they're maintained and housed. They truly do best when they have a solid floor as opposed to a wire cage to live in, and a solid floor that does not absorb urine is best. I know in the old days we had all wood floors for the hutches for a lot of the hares. But if you can put something down that doesn't absorb urine, it's better off for the health. I actually use poly trays in mine, cover them with white wood shavings, and then stacked on with about 3 inches of nice quality straw. And that provides an ideal, you know, place for them to live. They, some people do try to put mats and this, that, and the other over wire and use wire. But personally, I haven't seen that as being successful. But like I tell everyone, with rabbits, you feed and you do what you find works best for your rabbits. Whether it works for mine or not, doesn't really matter. It's what works for yours.
Yeah. Yep. Good advice. Yeah. Okay. Amanda, is there anything else back there at Control Central?
No, there is not. And I think we should, I don't have any other things coming in right this moment.
All righty. Well, hey, I want to give my thank yous as normal. I want to thank Amanda there at the Control Center. She's got like 3 computer screens in front of her, a couple of phones. This looks like NASA. She's half of our web team. The other half is Jane Burt. She's our webmaster and our newsletter editor. And of course, Amanda here does these special projects and our D8 Facebook page. To recap, I want to say, you know, thank you again to our viewers. Y'all are the reason we do these. The primary purpose is our kids, our youth out there, but of course, adults are welcome as well. You know, at times like this, you got to try and help everybody else out right there. And we are going to be working on some more workshops. They're not finalized yet, but check back often and hopefully we'll have something for you very soon. And I want to say thank you to my speaker, Jeff Hardin. Appreciate your time this evening and helping pass your knowledge on to us.
Thank you, Terry.
We're glad to have you. Thank you. So my friends out there, stay safe and check back often, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.